Hello and welcome to Super Hell, aka the Mystery Spotcast, a show where two recovering Supernatural fans subject themselves to a rewatch. I'm Klaudia, my pronouns are she, her. You can find me on social media at Klaudia Says, K-A-L-U-D-I-A Says.
And I am Ollie. I use any pronouns. You can find me on social media at Ollie Fresh. That's fresh with a PH. Supernatural, am I right, ladies?
You're done.
Yeah. I fear I am committing a cancelable offense in talking about the television show Supernatural that our podcast is about.
The two episodes that we have for you today are some of the best and also most infamous.
These are quintessential Supernatural episodes.
Yeah, these are ones that, like, when you watch them, usually at some part of your life that was pivotal, maybe as a teenager, they made quite an impact on you. Maybe not even a good. Some of them not a good impact. Some of them a good impact. Other ones just an impact in your brain of some kind. It left an indelible mark, for one reason or another. Ollie, would you like to take us through the first one?
I would love to take us through the first one. So the first one that we are going to talk about today is Season 1, Episode 12. It is called Faith. And when I tell you, I have seen this episode a lot. I rewatched it. I watched it once by myself. And then when I was first watching when I was a teenager, I watched it once by myself, watched it once with some friends, watched it once with some other friends, then watched it again by myself at least 2 more times. I don't know why. But I was obsessed with this one, the grip she had on me.
I fear you may be neurodivergent in a minor.
I fear I was neurodivergent in a minor, and now, unfortunately, I'm neurodivergent in an adult. But let's go ahead and get into it. This episode actually starts a lot different from most episodes of Supernatural. In most times, the cold open will be like, oh, here's the first victim of whatever monster is happening. But no. This episode actually starts with Sam and Dean. They run around to the back of the Impala. They pop open the trunk and they get some tasers. And Dean is like, hey, remember, these tasers are 100,000 volts, so just be careful. That's a clue that we'll use later. But he's like, oh, there's these tasers are 100,000 volts. We gotta go.
We also get a little view of the dream catcher in the back of the Impala in that shot. It's very problematic of you, Dean and Sam. Stop that. Anyways, continue.
Yeah, Dean and Sam are over party. Oh my God, Dean and Sam did something problematic. That's crazy.
Have a cancel counter.
The Mystery Spotcast official cancel counter. So we see them with these tasers and their weapons or whatever. And they basically kick down the door to this basement, run inside. They hear some noises and they pop open a closet and there's these 2 kids who are screaming, crying, throwing up, eating the drywall. No, they're just screaming and crying. And Sam and Dean are like, oh my God, you got to get out of here. Come on, guys. Sam takes the kids. They run upstairs out of the basement and Dean is like, don't worry. I gotta fight it with electricity. And this part is one of those things.
Electro.
This is one of those things that I swear you can see happening from a mile away. Because basically this is such a damp basement. And Dean is backing up and he steps in a puddle of water. And the monster starts coming at him. And it's dark. We don't really get to see what it is, but it's vaguely human shaped. Dean pulls out his taser and shoots the thing with the taser as it is stepping into the same puddle that Dean is in. So it comes back and electrocutes Dean as well. And he then passes out. And then Sam runs down the stairs and it's Dean! And
Dean, maybe you should have finished high school.
No, Dean, maybe if you finished high school, you would have known that water conducts electricity. So Dean gets basically tased by himself, really hard.
What monster needs a taser? Do we even know?
Maybe. I don't think actually.
I don't think it
Wait.
Again.
The Supernatural wiki does. It comes up in season 14.
Shut up.
It is called a rawhead.
Are you for real? Man, I don't
Yeah, it
remember that
comes
at
up in
all.
season 14. A hunter from Apocalypse World had his
Not
wounds tended
Apocalypse
to
World.
um okay, it does appear that it's just some glupshido monster that they just use when they need a monster.
Yeah,
Um
it's literally just a type of creature that lurks in basements and preys upon children. So it's like literally make when I go in the basement, my mom's like, "Ooh, I hope Slenderman isn't there," and I'm like, "Ah!"
yeah, so I hope Rawhead's not down there, and then he is, and then he makes Dean Winchester electrocute himself. Um, but yeah, basically that part ends with the monster's clearly like dead. She is gone. He is gone. They are gone. They use any pronouns, I've decided.
Oh my
Um,
god! Now you misgendering the raw.
they use any pronouns, okay? They're my kin. Um, kin in the way that deep people from the deep south say it, not like kin in the way that people on Tumblr say it. The title screen, Supernatural, happens. Then we cut, smash cut. Sam is talking to the receptionist at a hospital. And he's like, they're going back and forth. And she's like, do you guys have insurance? Because I don't see any on file. And he's like, here's a credit card. And she says, like, oh, thank you. And looks, and it's like a fake last name.
It's a real look into the problems of healthcare in this country. Another issue that Supernatural has attempted to tackle.
Yeah. Um, so this doctor walks up and he's like, hey, oh, sorry, hold on. So right after Sam finishes talking to the woman at the counter, he turns around and the police are there and they're like, oh my God, hey, what happened? And Sam is like, yeah, I don't know, like some guy attacked us or whatever, but we just randomly found these kids, so they're safe now. And the guy's like, well, thank God you did. So clearly, like, they solved the issue and they saved the children that they had to save. So it wasn't completely in vain. The next scene is the doctor walking out. And Sam is like, how is he? And the doctor's like, well, he got electrocuted like pretty bad. He had a major heart attack. And I give him like a couple weeks to like 2 months. Like, he's not going to make it, bestie. I'm sorry. There's nothing we can do except for make him comfortable. And Sam is like, no, I don't think that's true. You've got to be able to do something. The doctor says, we can't work miracles. I'm sorry. Little does the doctor know, this is a show called Supernatural. So miracles are very possible. But basically,
There can be miracle.
Sam walks into Dean's room and he's like, hey. And Dean is watching television, like daytime TV.
This is one of its best jokes because Jensen Ackles was on soap operas, namely my mom's favorite, Days of Our Lives, before Supernatural, and he does make a little joke where he's like, ugh, daytime TV, who watches that, am I right? And you're like, so funny.
Yeah, there is also a part where he says, like, I want to hunt down that fluffy bear son of a bitch. Talking about like the oh my gosh, I can't remember what it was for now. There was the commercial for fabric softener and it had this little bear
God.
in like the early mid 2000s.
The Downy Bear?
Was it Downy?
I think so.
Yeah, well, anyway, Dean was like, I hates this bear, I guess, for some reason. It just made me laugh because I was like, that bear also scared the shit out of me as a child.
Isn't there a later episode where they hunt down where there's a weird teddy bear episode?
There is. Oh my God, Dean feeling vindicated. But Dean is like really actually quite accepting. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna die, Sam. And Sam's like, no, we have options. And Dean's like, yeah, like do we want like open casket or do we want like ashes? Like, what? There's no options. Don't worry about it. And Sam's like, well, I'm gonna figure it out.
So this is the first point, and there are so many in this episode where watching this after watching the end of the show makes me feel fucking insane, because him being like, I accept death, and Sam being like, no, I can save you, whatever. You're like, bro, not the parallels with the nail. Like, literally,
Oh my God.
I was like, no, I cannot be watching this foreshadowing of the future. I can't.
Maybe, okay, Maybe that's why the nail worked so well, because he got electrocuted and his heart hurted very bad. Anyway.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm gonna die and you can't stop it. Yeah, you're correct. Oh my God. And,
well, perhaps, but not now.
Like,
not now. No, Sammy is not letting that happen. In fact, Sam leaves the hospital. He said goodbye. And he is like at their hotel going through papers. He's suffering. He is flipping through everything. He's on his computer. He opens his phone and he calls his dad, and it goes to his voicemail. He's like, Dad, you're probably not going to get this. Dean is like really, really sick and probably not going to make it. Just wanted to let you know. Bye. And I'm like,
John Winchester.
John Winchester, I hate you so much. Because here's the thing. We know John Winchester's checking his messages. Listen, I know I'm not John Winchester, but like, I don't care how big grand my journey is. Like, if someone was like, your literal child is probably going to die in the hospital, I would be like, okay, well, sorry to Mary or whoever the fuck, I got to go be with my little guy. But John Winchester's a horrible parent. So
this is reason number 8,000 that John Winchester can go die.
Oh my God. So Sam is doing all this research and he's clearly getting kind of frustrated. Guess who walks in the door but Dean? And he looks like shit. He looks horrible. He's got dark circles. He's like limping. And Sam was like, what are you doing here? He's like, I checked myself out. So Sam is like, well, I didn't find any luck like myself, but one of Dad's friends who lives in Nebraska said that there's like a specialist we could go see. So they go to Nebraska, and the next scene is them like getting out of the car. And Dean is like, I can't believe you brought me to a faith healer. And it's like a church service. It's clearly like almost like an evangelical kind of service.
In a tent in a field.
In a tent in a field. It's very much giving rural. But
yeah,
they're like,
also Roy Le Grange has nothing on my good bitch Gideon Gleeful from Gravity Falls.
I was thinking that. So yeah, they walk up and it says like, oh, see, like Roy Le Grange is the name of the pastor. I was like, Lil Gideon could body this dude.
Yeah, Lil Gideon would be like, you're a fucking fraud. I work with a demon.
Lil Gideon would be like, you're a fucking fraud. I work with a demon. It's me, Lil Gideon.
This is the most horrifying Tumblr thing where we're talking about a crossover with Bill Cipher and Supernatural.
Yeah. Sorry to those of you who haven't watched Gravity Falls. It's a much better show about supernatural things. I recommend it very much.
Supernatural, you should not watch. Gravity Falls, absolutely 100%.
Yeah.
You should watch it in tandem with the Owl House, which I have mentioned before on this podcast.
So Dean is like, this is some bullshit. They walk into the tent. And this woman, her name is Layla. She is actually played by Julie Benz, who plays Darla in Buffy and Angel. So if you're a fan of the genre, you will know who she is.
2000s television royalty, am I right?
So true. Julie Benz, I'm obsessed with you. I have been obsessed with her since she played Darla. I was like, I think I might be in love with you. Anyway, but she basically, like, they chat with this girl for a second.
I have to interject because there are two things. Once again, things that Dean says that make me feel crazy as they are walking into the tent before Roy begins. Dean says, either in this or the scene before, he goes, I laugh in the face of death. And you're like, oh, he does that literally. Several times, in fact. Several times. This is making me feel insane. And then
several times, just like the boy band from Gravity Falls.
You're done. And then when he meets Layla, like they're talking, like him and Sam are having a conversation about faith and about God, which is very funny because, as we all know, this story is being written by God as we speak. And Layla walks up and Dean is, I gotta check out the women who appear. And he's like, maybe he just turned me around on the subject. And you're like, yeah, literally. God literally wrote that part I'm feeling crazy. I'm feeling fucking insane right now. And then I started thinking, I was like, oh, like maybe it was just Chuck making him be straight the whole time, and he was really gay on the inside.
Not
like,
homophobic Chuck.
Yeah, I mean, he's God.
Oh my God, no. Speaking
like,
of
Dean was always gay, and Dean was like, what if I wrote him to be straight because I'm an evil little bitch?
Speaking of homophobia, this episode does have a lot for homophobia.
It does.
And we'll get there, but
it does. But then Sam says, like, Sam goes into his little, like Dean's like, they've done this a couple times even before this, where Sam's like, what do you mean you don't believe in a faith healer? We see magic shit all the time. Like, why wouldn't this be any more real? And Dean's like, well, I believe in stuff that I can see, and I believe in, like, the monsters that I kill or whatever. And Sam's like, okay, well, do you believe that good can exist too? And, like, that's kind of Sam's whole thing, like, through the whole thing. And, like, when Sam has crises of faith, like, through the whole, because I was calling faith, when Sam has crises of faith, like, through the whole series, like, that's what gets tested for him, is, like, that maybe there's good in him, like, that is there really good as well in the world? But, like, then Dean's whole arc is, like, him being able to see good, which happens to be embodied in Castiel.
Stop, we can't, guys.
I will be bringing it up.
Once again, like, when we get to Cass in this podcast is going to become unlistenable. Like,
I will be bringing it up. So, like, but this is like this is a conversation that, like, Sam and Dean are gonna keep having this conversation about faith. And it's like it's like totally passed off in this episode. They're like walking into whatever, and he's like asking Dean, like, deep questions about what he means about faith.
Okay, what's also really funny is as they're getting out of the car in this very crowded parking lot of churchgoers, Dean's like, this is all so stupid, and no one says anything.
And also, as they are walking in is when they see there's a protester who's like, this man's a fraud. He's not healing anybody. He's defrauding you out of your money. And then
which makes me think, are they paying to be there?
Are they, like, paying for tickets like the circus?
No. Like, other than the offerings, like, do you have to buy a ticket to go to this church?
Maybe they're tithing. I don't know. I can't deal with this. Anyway, so we'll get back. Oh, yeah. We have to get back to
the plot of the episode.
Sorry.
So they walk into the tent, and Dean tries to sit down in the back, and Sam is like, no, we are going to the front. And Dean's like, this is literally so embarrassing. So the priest, the father, the Holy Spirit,
he's more of a preacher. He's more of a preacher
than anything. That's the word I meant that I just couldn't remember. But he starts kind of doing this sermon, and it's very interesting to watch. It is like there's organ music playing. Don't know where the organ is because they are in a tent. But there's, like, organ music playing, and he starts doing this, like, call and response deal. It's a very deep South, even though it's in Nebraska, but it's a very, like, deep South kind of, we're all coming together and we're doing this. And the guy is like, oh, we're doing this for, like, I am healing, like, for the Lord. And Dean is like, yeah, or to, like, get in these people's pockets. And he kind of says it under his breath, but the preacher has sunglasses on, and he says, oh, no, son, you should be careful saying those sort of things about it in front of a blind man. We've got real sharp ears.
Damn, Daredevil moment.
So Dean is then like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. No, that was out of pocket. I'm so sorry. And he goes, no, young man, come up here. Come up. I'm going to heal you. And Dean is like, no. You can pick someone else. I don't need to be healed. It's whatever. And he's like, no, come on. And Dean's like, okay. And is this the part where he says, why'd you choose me?
Yeah.
This is the part where he says, like, why did you pick me? Like, why would you do this? And Roy goes, I didn't pick you. The Lord did.
The way I had to pause it, get out of my seat, and start screaming, crying, and throwing up.
Yeah, because, like, literally he did. But
Dean literally is God's special little guy, and not in a good way. Like, in a, I'm gonna play with this toy and fuck up his life. Like, he did pick you. And I watching this episode and imagining it as like Chuck being like, this is so funny. It's very funny to me.
This is one of the episodes where I was like, if they actually wrote out the plot that happened on this show, this would be genius.
This would be crazy.
Unfortunately,
but they did it by accident.
Because this was they accidentally like found like they found the needle in the haystack somehow. The preacher starts being like, all right, everybody pray with me. And he lays his hands upon Dean and everyone starts praying. And then Dean's like, whoa. And then he just like collapses. So Sam like runs up, he's like, Dean. Sorry, I'm obsessed with the way that Sam says Dean's name in the show because he'll be like, Dean. But he runs up and he grabs Dean and he's like, whoa, what? And Dean's like kind of opens his eyes and he looks up and he sees this like fucked up old man with like gray skin and lines all over his face, like walking away. And then he blinks and it's gone. And he's like, whoa. And he was like standing on the other side of the preacher. So he was like, okay, that was not normal. And it was crazy.
I will also say here, and this will not be the first time that I mention this, but I have made the comparison between Supernatural is one of the worst shows ever made, and then Full Metal Alchemist and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is one of the best shows / stories because it was a manga first ever made. And the duality is that they are essentially the same story, which makes me feel crazy. It's about two brothers who sacrifice everything for each other and fight God. The two polar opposites of that story, and both at the beginning of their story in their season 1 have this episode, which is the fake preacher episode.
To be fair, spoilers for the end of the episode. He's not really. We'll get to if he's fake or not.
Have the is he really healing people fake preacher trope episode. This is a shout out to, instead of watching Supernatural, go watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, the best TV show ever made. Also the best story ever told and written by a woman, unlike most of this show.
Listen, I agree with you completely, but unfortunately the best show ever written was Golden Girls. So the boys, capital T, capital B, the boys go to the hospital and a doctor walks in and she's like, yeah, I don't see anything wrong with your heart. It's perfectly healthy. It's like you've never had an issue. But, you know, for a 27-year-old guy, I don't imagine there's going to be a lot of like long-lasting heart problems.
Dean are the same age.
I know, he had a birthday between the first episode and this episode.
Oh, Dean.
But the doctor is like, yeah, it's crazy. I wouldn't expect it to be that way, but you know, things happen. And Dean's like, oh, like, did something happen? And she's like, yeah, so the other day, a guy who's like 27, it's like your same age, just had a random heart attack and died. And it's crazy. Like, you know, like just freak accident. It's crazy. Doesn't normally happen. Anyway, bye. So they leave and Dean is like, Sam, some bullshit happened. I swear I saw something. We need to like investigate. And Sam was like, can't we just be thankful? And Dean is like, no, go figure out what happened to this dude who died. I'm going to go talk to Roy and figure out what happened. So Dean goes to talk to Roy. So he goes to their house and he pulls up and he sits down and he's like, hey guys, is it okay if I ask some questions just about what happened? I'm trying to make sense of it. And Roy is like Roy and his wife, Sue Ann, are both there. And they're like, yeah, well, let's sit down. It's obviously a very weird thing that happened to you. You need to get closure. So Dean's like, so what happened? When did you start performing these like miracles? And Roy is like, I woke up one day blind with cancer. And then I prayed. And then I went into a coma. And then I woke up and I didn't have cancer anymore. I'm still blind, but that's okay. But also I could heal people. And then he says, Dean is like, well, why would you pick me? You said the Lord picked me. And he's like, he did. You got picked because you have purpose and a future. That's why you were picked over all of the other people, like sick people in that service. It's just a fun little.
Hey, Chuck.
Hey, Chuck, what is your deal?
Quickly. Hello. Because, yeah, he does. Hello?
Yeah. So then we cut to Sam, who is like, I believe he's at like a gym. His name was Marshall. And he's like talking to this gentleman who works at the gym. And he was like, hey, so like, did you see him that day? Like, what's up? The guy was like, no, he was like perfectly healthy. He was like in doing laps like right before. And then he just died. Like, I don't know what happened. He was just like, he was completely fine. And then Sam was like, that's really weird. And like, he was healthy and like active. Interesting. And as he's walking out, he looks up at the clock and he says, oh, your clock's broken. And the guy working there is like, yeah, it's been actually stuck at 4:17. We can't get it to work. And Sam is like, oh, that is the time that Dean got saved. So yeah.
Oh my god, Full Metal Alchemist equivalent exchange moment.
So basically, Marshall died at the same time that Dean was healed. So then we cut back to Dean. He's leaving their house. And as he's walking down the stairs, Layla and her mother walk up. And Layla was the one who was at the church. And Layla's mom is like, I just think it's crazy that he would heal you, a non-believer, before he heals my daughter who's been to every service. And Dean's like, oh, dude, I'm sorry. I don't know. And she's like, Mom, it's okay. And he's like, oh, well, like, I'm so sorry. Like, what's wrong? And she's like, well, I have a brain tumor and basically I have 6 months to live. But I'm not mad at you. You're fine. And her mom is clearly like trying to kill him with her mind.
Which is so powerful of her. I also, for a moment, like, yeah, technically he was like, oh, I don't believe whatever. But also, like, did she clock that he was a homosexual and she didn't like that?
The homophobia on this episode is insane. The boys meet up to discuss. Sam is like, I've cross-checked all of the times of Roy's services for the last like little bit. And every time he has healed someone, another person has died of the exact same symptoms. And as he is explaining this episode has a lot of really cool shots, because as Sam is explaining this, it is overlaid with a woman jogging. Then it cuts to Roy and he's like healing someone actively, like at a service. It's like this old man who is clearly like having trouble, like respiratory issues. And as Roy is doing the healing, we see the same old nasty guy who Dean saw when he woke up from being healed. We see this dude chasing this probably 20-something woman as she's like a jogger. And we see him basically chasing her down. And he like puts his hand on her face and her eyes go white and she just like dies. And then we see that same Reaper appear at the church and put his hand on Roy's shoulder as Roy is healing this old man. And it's a really, really cool sequence. I'm almost like saying, like, if you are interested in, like, if you're going to watch an S sequence from Supernatural, make it this one. Because this is like really, really well done, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a good one. And it's funny because spoiler alert for what we're about to explain, but they have Reapers later in the show, and they don't look like this. They don't really reap souls in the same way or whatever. They do make it like creepy, and they have a whole process for it in this episode.
Yeah. But Sam is like, oh yeah, it's crazy. Like, he's explaining this. So then it cuts back after we see that, as an audience, see this happen. It cuts back to Sam and Dean chatting. And Dean is like, that's got to be a Reaper. Because it's like, it's choosing who lives and dies. Like, that's the only thing that can do that with that much power that quickly. Like, who gets to, like, who can not just take energy, but transfer it. So that's good to know. So they're like, oh, cool, we're working with a Reaper. And then Dean is like, well, you know what, Sam, you couldn't see it, because I kept trying to say, like, oh, look, this thing was there, and Sam didn't see it when Dean got healed. So Dean's like, it's probably only the person it's hunting can see it. And Sam, earlier in the show, while Dean was getting healed at this church, he saw a very particular cross. And he's like, as they're talking about Reapers, he's like, this is sounding kind of familiar to me. And he pulls out the death card from a tarot deck. And
Like, girly, why do you carry around a tarot deck? It seems a little gay to me.
Sam is doing people's tarot readings at college. But
That's so powerful of him. That's why he didn't score higher than Elwood's, because he was too busy doing tarot readings.
Too busy doing tarot readings. But he looks and he's like, on the death card, there's this cross, and it's the exact same cross as the one at the church. So there's something fishy is going on here, like some sort of binding spell, maybe, like somehow they're using the Reaper, whatever. So Sam is like, we need to break the spell. And Dean is like, well, we should just, to break the spell, we should probably just like kill the guy, right? He's doing this. And Sam is like, Dean, we cannot kill like a person. Like, we need to break the spell. That is a guy. We cannot just like kill a guy.
And he says he's like, playing God, that's a monster in my book. Like, we have to kill it. And Sam's like, well, we can't kill death either. And you're like,
yeah, horrible foreshadowing. If only the show was written intentionally.
That's a surprise tool we will use at least twice later.
Probably more.
Shout out to Billy, girl. You deserve so much better.
Oh, Billy. So they go to the church. And basically the way this is laid out is there's like this tent where the services are held. And then the preacher's house is like right there. So Sam is like, while the service is happening, I'm going to go into the house and try to find like a spell book or some sort of evidence of like a ritual or whatever. You go stall the next healing. So Dean's like, cool. So they split up and Sam basically breaks into this house and he finds a book and he goes through and he's like, there's nothing, because there was like, clearly someone had taken this book off the shelf because that's where the dust is worn off that's on the shelf. So he's like, oh, this book is frequently visited. And he's like, oh, there's nothing really in this book. But he looks behind the book, like on the shelf, and sees that there's this little tiny booklet. And he's kind of thumbing through the booklet and he finds these newspaper clippings. And the newspaper clippings are, the first one is about someone who is openly gay teacher, and the next one is like abortion activist.
Damn, shit really hasn't changed since 2005.
And then he opens to the next one and it's like a picture of the guy, the protester from earlier, and it's like, oh, protester saying church is a scam, and it's like a news clipping. So he's like, uh-oh, this guy's probably, whatever's happening, this guy's probably getting it next, like he's probably dying next. Meanwhile, Dean is outside and Dean is like trying to be like, I don't know what to do. So Sam calls Dean and is like, hey, I think that Roy may be killing people he believes to be immoral. And I think the next guy who's going to die is the protester who's out in the parking lot. So you got to stop it or that dude's about to bite it. So Dean's like, wig, okay, I will stop it. So he goes in. And Roy calls up Layla, the girl that they were talking to who has a brain tumor and is going to die in 6 months. And Dean is like, oh, okay, great. So he grabs her. He's like, Layla, please, like, don't do this. Something bad is going to happen. And she's like, well, he healed you. And he's like, you got me on that one. So she goes up. And Sam like runs out into the parking lot and the protester is like getting his ass beat by the Reaper, but Sam can't see it, but he's running up. He's like trying to help. And Dean sees Roy going to heal Layla and he's like, oh, there's a fire in here. There's a fire. Everyone leave.
I mean, you know what? You go, Dean. Come on.
No, that is like, I think that is like the best way to do it. Like, that is objectively the best way to do it. Like being like, there's a fire, whatever. So everyone starts leaving. But the protester collapses. So Sam's like, hey, I don't know what happened, but I don't think Roy is doing this because you said that the ritual was stopped, but like, uh-oh. So Dean is like, oh no. So he looks around the tent. He's like, something is still happening. It wasn't Roy. And he sees Sue Ann, Roy's wife, using a Coptic cross, which is like the one that's on the death tarot card. And she is like using it and speaking in Latin. And Dean runs over and he's like, hey, girly, and interrupts her. And then she stops. And then we cut back to Sam outside and the Reaper immediately goes away and the guy is fine. And Sue Ann is like, hey, you should leave right now. And Dean's like, hey, I just saw you doing something. And she's like, police, this man is attacking me. And I guess there are just cops there. So they basically just like escort Dean outside. And she's like, I'm not going to press charges, but I don't want to see you around here anymore. Just go. So Sam and Dean are like, well, that's no good. And then we overhear Roy and Sue Ann telling Layla, like, you'll get another chance, just come to the service tonight.
At what point do they say, I think it's Dean who says it, God save us from the people who think they're doing God's work?
It's about this point, like where Sam is kind of explaining, like, here's she is finding people who she thinks are immoral. And this is where they're trying to figure out, like, why would she do this? And Dean is like, because her husband was dying, she had to do anything to save him. And then Sam is like, well, like, her husband's still alive. And he's like, Dean's like, well, now she has this outlet to get rid of people she thinks are immoral. And then he says that.
This was me as a SJW teen was like, you know what? That's so Yas and Slay of you, Dean, to be like, actually, the people who do this stuff in God's name kind of suck. And I was like, so true.
Yeah.
Also a bit of foreshadowing because he does have to be saved from people doing bad things in God's name, namely the angels.
Yeah.
So I love foreshadowing.
The episode is almost over at this point. Dean and Sam come back in the evening. They're like, okay, we are going to stop this ritual. Sam is like, okay, we need to get into the house and find whatever she is using to bind it. So probably some sort of altar or something. So Sam is like, I'm going to go look for the altar. But then the police show up because the police are like, there was some funny business going on. And Dean is like, I'm going to distract the police. So he walks up and he's like, you said there would be trouble if I came around here again. And then is running and just like fucking with the police.
Oh my God, ACAP Dean Winchester
once again. And Sam is like, cool. He breaks into the basement of these people and is going through, and he finds like a fucked up altar with like black magic. And in the middle of the altar, what is there but a picture of Dean Winchester, and his face is crossed out in blood. So Sam is like, uh-oh, that's probably means Dean is gonna die for whoever gets saved, for Layla to live. Uh-oh. And as he is like going to try to examine this, Sue Ann confronts him and she's like, we're doing the right thing here, Sam. Layla deserves to live more than your brother because your brother's a bad person. And Sam is like, okay. And he flips her altar over and then she locks him in the basement. And he's like, okay, cool. So now I'm locked in this basement. So Sam is then trying to break out of said basement. Then again, we get a really cool sequence where it's a lot very reminiscent of the one before, where Roy is doing this healing to Layla. And then we see the Reaper approach Dean. And it's like going to basically suck his life out. And as this is all happening all at once, Sam busts out of the basement, grabs the cross that Sue Ann is using and smashes it on the ground. And then the Reaper stops trying to kill Dean. And then it cuts to inside of the tent and Layla's like, nothing happened. I don't feel any different. And then the Reaper rolls up to where Sam and Sue Ann are standing and it basically just sucks the life out of Sue Ann. It is crazy. It is a crazy sequence of events. There's so much happening.
The Reaper also has this moment of like, I'm free.
Literally, he's like, damn, I hate it here.
He was like, damn, bitch, you gotta go.
So Sam and Dean go back to the hotel and Dean is like, I don't know if we did the right thing. That is fucked up. Like, Layla deserved to live more than me. Like, she's a person and she only has 6 months left to live. And Sam is like, we can't focus on that right now. And like, honestly, that you can't play God, just like they can't play God. Like, we don't get to decide who lives and dies.
He also said earlier in the episode when Dean was like, I feel bad because the other guy died for me, whatever. And he was like, that guy would have died anyway with the next person that he healed. Like, it's whether it's you or somebody else. Like,
yeah.
And you're like, that's true.
Yeah. But then someone knocks on the door and it's Layla. And she walks in and he's like, oh my God. Dina's like, Layla, how'd you find us? And she's like, Sam called me to say, because he said you wanted to say goodbye. And then Sam's like, I'm going to go grab a soda or something. And he leaves.
Heterosexuality is kicking people's ass in this episode.
He leaves the two of them alone in this hotel room. And Layla sits down on the bed next to Dean. And she's like, did you hear about Sue Ann? She died of a stroke. And Dean's like, yeah, that is crazy bonkers. Really sorry for Roy. He seems like a good man. And she's like, yeah. And he's like, I'm really sorry that you didn't get healed. And this is, again, like a really beautiful scene, in my opinion.
Yeah, but this is one of those scenes that you think about later when several things happen. You're like, damn, shit.
Yeah. But it's also like, it's just a good scene. Like, the writing is really good. The acting is good. But Layla basically sits down and Dean's like, I'm really sorry you didn't get healed. And she's like, well, that's the thing about faith. You can't only have it when the miracles happen. I'm okay. Dean's like, but you're gonna like die in like 6 months. And she's like, yeah. And you know what? The weird thing is that I'm okay. I'm fine with it. I've made my peace. You have to have faith even when the miracles don't happen. And Dean then, in the most like heart-wrenching,
I did just have a thought.
She gets up and Dean is like, she's like, thank you, Dean. Like, it was nice to meet you. I'm gonna go now. And he was like, hey, I'm not really the praying type, but I will pray for you. And I was like, damn. And then the episode ends.
There's so much to unpack there, because some of the few times that Dean ever shows that kind of faith of like something that he is never going to see or whatever. Hey, remember the year that they spent in purgatory?
Oh no.
Remember, I think about this all the time, about the few times that Dean ever has any faith, like when it involves like his brother and like his brother dying or whatever, like it's more of like a faith in himself that he'll figure something out, whatever. But like when it does involve Castiel, there is that literal faith. He also says, must be rough to believe in something so much and have it disappoint you like that.
Oh, Dean Winchester, you were so depressing, sir.
First of all, that is Sam's whole arc. That is also Castiel's arc.
Yeah, I fear that if this show had been written intentionally, it would be very good.
I mean, that is also Dean's arc of like him like really believing in like, yeah, I fight with dad and I whatever, and then like that completely is come out from under him. And then later on, like his whole belief is in like the power of free will, and then he does find out that like God has been writing his story the whole time, and he does have to find out like what he believed in did not exist. And you're like, wow, there's so many layers to this. And then Layla also says God works in mysterious ways, and I'm like, Chuck, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, shut the Chuck up.
Also, every time Dean says I'm not the praying type, and I'm like,
You do pray, unfortunately, darling.
You do pray quite a lot. You know, this is the one time where you said I'm going to pray for somebody, and then the next time you pray, so we're going to, correct me if I'm wrong, because we may see it in a later, I believe the next time you pray is to your little angel boyfriend. So, that episode makes me feel crazy, and if you want to hear more of me talking about early season episodes involving Dean and Sam and Faith before they meet Castiel, I was on Driver Picks, the podcast, and I talked about an episode in season 2 that is similar to this, where they talk about faith and God and angels, and I feel great. The next episode is we have finally reached the infamous racist truck episode. Is this episode good? I mean, it has some good things in it.
I would actually argue, I feel like I remembered it being way worse. But when I watched it, I feel like it is a prime example of Supernatural in which it is like, it is actually like, it makes some points, and there's some there's a really amazing performance, like an amazing monologue in this episode by a guest star. I feel like this is a situation of where, like, I don't know how else I would expect them to handle this issue. I feel like they did the best that they could because it was written in 2005 by 2 white writers. But this episode, you heard right, is about a racist truck.
This is the racist truck episode. And I would just like to preface this with, this was done by 2 white writers in 2005, so just prepare yourself. And some things are decent, and some things are, okay.
I think a lot of it, I think, too, is like the moral of the story, I think, is good. And like what it ended up being like, it
could have been far worse.
Oh yeah, I think like the major plot beats, I'm like, okay, that was pretty solid. But it's like there were a couple moments in there where I was like, But I think that's also by nature of the fact that it was a show in 2005 written by white writers about an issue that Black people face. So just keep that in mind.
And also within the context of the rest of the show, that they do not really cover like race. Like, this is a show that is about the supernatural amongst Americana, and the most American thing is racism and American racism, and they really just don't dig into that a lot. And a thing that they do in the first season, we've talked about this, is like, we're gonna cover every horror trope, we're gonna cover every like American urban legend, whatever. And so it would make sense for you to go, okay, well, the history of this country is quite racist, so some of the ghosts are gonna be racist. So that makes sense, logically. Unfortunately, after this episode, it is not discussed a lot. Which I feel like is another problem. But that's a wider issue of like Hollywood and the CW, and also the show. Anyways,
I feel like a lot of the problems with this episode are not necessarily the episode itself, but the context with which it comes. Because I think like the episode itself is fine, but I think if it were in context of a show that dealt with issues regarding race and marginalized groups with more tact, then it would be like, okay, this is just an episode. But because it has such a track record, and it will continue to create a track record, it feels weird. Like, it's hard to say like, oh, this was a good episode, because like I think it has its issues, but all things considered, it was not bad. But because everything else is so bad, I'm like, I can't, I'm scared to say like, oh, it was good.
Yeah, it's like the Bugs episode. You're like, that one didn't,
that was bad.
That was bad. That was just bad on many fronts.
Yeah.
This one, you're like, okay, all right. So, we are in Missouri. And the episode starts with, there's this man, he's driving along when his radio starts to break up, and this huge black like monster truck pulls up behind him and starts like just like chasing him down the road. Then the truck disappears and the radio clears, and then the truck suddenly appears in front of him, and the driver's like, holy shit, and turns around, and then the truck chases him, and basically rams him off the road. And then the truck pulls up to the wreck for a moment, like to kind of look at it, and then vanishes. It's very weird. Hi, welcome to Cars. Does Cars exist in
Supernatural? I fear that if the Clone Wars exists, there's little reason to believe that Cars would not.
Oh my god, it's the racist truck versus Tow Mater.
Tow Mater would never. Tow Mater is not a racist truck.
Tow Mater would kill the racist truck on sight.
Tow Mater versus the racist truck cage match. Mater is bodying him.
This episode is also called Route 666. So
I forgot about that. When the title screen, like when I saw what it said, what it was called on the bottom, I did start laughing.
You're like, oh, come on. My partner Claire did say that this episode should be called Life is a Highway, and I'm like, you're done. Stop. The Cars jokes stop here. So then we have this Supernatural opening title card, and then we have the brothers they're heading for Pennsylvania. Dean gets a call from an old friend, and she needs help. Her dad died the previous night.
This is also a very funny scene. It's not funny, but like, it's funny because Sam is like, has all these maps laid out on top of the car, like they're at like a rest stop or something, and he's like, okay, I think I finally figured out a way where we can get to Pennsylvania by morning and we don't have to do all this. And he's explaining kind of his plan, and Dean's like, actually, we're not going to Pennsylvania. And I'm like, if that was me, I'd be pissed. Like, Sam clearly spent all this time trying to figure out how to get to Pennsylvania, and then Dean's like, my friend called. No.
Yeah, and so it's a girl, and here begins where there's a lot of problems that we will be discussing in this episode, but there's also another thing that does make you feel crazy. The girl's name is Cassie.
But listen, okay, I'm gonna say it now. The girl's name is Cassie. We cannot we can't talk about it again because we will lose our minds.
The girl's name is Cassie. And she's an old friend of Dean's, and Sam is surprised and he is upset that Dean just straight up listened and was like, we're going, and it was interrupted. And when they're on their way there, he's like, what kind of friend? And Dean's like, I choose to not answer that question. And he's like, you never really talked about her. Like, what do you mean? When they get there, Cassie and her father's friend, Jim, they both work for the newspaper. Oh my God, women in journalism. And they're meeting with the mayor about her father's death. The death of her father and another black man. So Cassie is black, her dad is black, and then another guy who died was black. And the mayor, who's white, is, as it is described in the wiki here, the mayor isn't helpful. And you have Cassie.
Yeah. I mean, the mayor is basically like, listen, I know you're upset, but I think you may just be so upset. Like that was he ran off the road. So he just lost control of the car. That must be what happened. Like,
and Cassie's like, well, why are all the people who have died have been black people and on the same stretch of road? Let's investigate that one.
Yeah. And he's like, I gotta go. Goodbye.
And she's like, this is suspicious.
Sam and Dean walk in at the tail end of this conversation. Cassie turns around and Dean is like, hey. And she's like, oh my God. She's like, oh my God, Dean. And she walks up and she kind of looks at him, and Sam is standing there like, what the fuck is happening right now?
Like what? In front of my salad?
No, literally, he's like, what is going on? Uh-oh. I fear my brother may be down astronomically bad.
Also, sir, her father did just die.
No, that is, I will say, my biggest not just a complaint about this episode is the way that she is acting in the immediate wake of her father's death.
In a possible hate crime.
In which it seems like her and her father were quite close. But
like, and like the whole time, like Sam is like, ha, and Dean, like maybe it's like something, whatever. And you're like, her father just fucking died in a hate crime. Can you please focus, people?
Like, but I will say they have this, like, this is like a very like interesting reaction where he is like, oh yeah, whatever, we're here to help with your dad. We're really sorry. And she's like, well, I didn't really know who else to call, but thank you for coming. They get back in the car and Sam is like, so you told her?
Oh yeah. And Sam's really pissed because he's like, I kept our secret, not of being gay, but the ghosts are real. I kept our secret because Dad told us to, from everybody, including Jess, all this time, especially Jess, who then fucking up and dies. But you just told your high school girlfriend, whatever, and Dean's like, yeah. So I was really like, I was really, yeah, sorry, oops. And
down bad.
Yeah, Sam's really pissed.
Yeah, Sam's like, damn, you really? Like, you make fun of me for being like college boy as a girlfriend. Dude, you knew her for like how long? And he's like, a couple weeks.
Yeah, and this is where I'm gonna give my TED talk that everybody's like, oh yeah, Dean's such a player, Dean's such a whatever. Much like Han Solo, he's not.
I had that exact thought. So I was like, he's not even fucking all that much. Like he meets one girl who he's like, I think I'm in love with you after a few weeks.
Dean's history is like, I got with this one girl and then I told her about my entire life ghost hunting. And then I've like gotten with some people, but mostly just like flirt with girls.
Yeah.
And don't really do much else. And then like he meets Castiel. And
he's some dalliances here and there, however.
And he just like, again, is just flirting with some women. And then he, once again, gets with one woman semi-permanently after that. And then after that, there's nobody. And he's like flirting with Crowley.
Like, here, I mean, okay, here's like, another.
Sir.
I also do believe I believe Ty Olsson would agree with me on this, that he and Benny explored each other's bodies in purgatory.
Absolutely.
Which I believe Ty Olsson has like said.
Absolutely. But
anyway.
That's my thing. I'm like, Dean's serial monogamist.
No, he literally is. Like, he is not the womanizer people make him out to be. Once again, who is the target demographic for your show, Supernatural?
Or that he makes himself out to be. Again.
It's about self-hatred.
Well, and I will say, I mean, not for us to bring up Star Wars, but like they did say when they were making this show that like they were like, oh, it's like if you did like Star Wars, but it was like Americana or whatever. Like they have compared it to that, and like that's a very Han Solo trait of him.
I fear they have not seen Star Wars.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Maybe if the writers of Supernatural had read Midnight Horizon by Daniel José Older.
Shout out to Daniel José Older. You're the only bitch I respect in the South. Anyway, so Sam, read the room. Like Sam has his own little tizzy when it's like, it's not about you, Sam. Basically they get back to they go back to Cassie's house. And Cassie's like, hey, there was only one set of tracks at the site. And there was no sign of like a collision or anything, even though like it looks like somebody was run off the road, but like there was like only one set of tracks. And her mother arrives, and her mother's white. And her mother is clearly very upset. And then it cuts to like out in the nighttime. We see the racist truck again. And it has run Jimmy, who is Cassie's dad's friend, who was with her, off the road, and
who is also
black. So she was correct that there is a pattern here. So
now not one, not two, but 3 black men have been killed on this one stretch of road.
It is not good.
Uh-oh, the racist truck is not having it.
Yeah, it is clearly a racist truck.
It is clearly a racist truck.
So this is the point in the episode where the Winchesters are there to investigate when one of the second act murder happens. And they look into the accident the next day, and the mayor is there again. And the mayor is, again, not very helpful. And he hints that Cassie's white mom...
Okay, Cassie is like...
lot.
Cassie's giving him this laundry list of what he has to do. She's like, you need to close the road. You need to, like, have a curfew. People keep dying. And it's all black men. Would you do this if it was white constituents? And the mayor is like, okay, I would love to do that. I can't close the road because it's literally the only road in town. Like, to get into town, I can't close it. But you should ask your mother why I'm not racist. Don't call me racist, because you ask your mother why. And then like walks away.
And like without context of what we know happens in the rest of the episode, that is very much giving off the like, well, I'm not a racist, and like, look at your mom. Yeah. She has an interracial marriage, and you're like, damn, dude.
Like, no. What are you saying? But then we find out what happens, and it's like, oh, actually, he's...
We find out why, but also, like, don't say that.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe don't say it like that. Spoiler alert, I feel he is kind of a boy boss.
Spoiler alert, he knows when to shut the fuck up.
No, he knows he's not a snitch. Anyway.
But, yeah, so... She's like, I don't understand why. And so, um, this is when the brothers they put on their stupid little suits. They claim to be insurance investigators, and they go to like a dock or something, which I'm like, aren't they? They go to like a dock, and they're like, we're gonna ask around about this truck.
It's to like a used car lot, because that was the thing. That the other thing too is Cassie was like, there's only one set of tracks, but also my dad ran a used car lot. Like, he is not driving around with a car with a dent in it, and there's a dent in the car. Like, someone hit him, even though there's no tire tracks.
Yeah, so he
and Jimmy was like the co-owner with Cassie's dad.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so he goes and he asks about the truck. And one of the workers, there's two workers sitting next to each other. One is white and one's black. And the black guy is like, yeah, there was actually some shit that happened here in the 60s. There was a like there was a truck that was involved with the death of several black men in the 60s. And he's like, yeah, people in this town were not so great, clearly.
Yeah, he's like, they did not give a shit, and the police barely investigated. So
yeah. And his white friend next to him is like, obviously.
Yeah. And his white friend is also, again, a kind of a boy boss, because he's like, he does not speak. He's like so true. He's like, staying in his lane.
Take this one. And then the juxtaposition, this is another moment of what the fuck, the juxtaposition between this man talking about this like very horrible thing that happened in the past of this town, cutting to Dean going, so it's like the Flying Dutchman, is so much for me. I was
literally
like, what the fuck, Dean?
I know, it's like he walks, he's like, so maybe like someone's spirit is infused in this truck that's fucked up and racist. It's like a lot like the Flying Dutchman, how his ghost is connected.
What the fuck,
and Sam is like, cool, maybe you should go hang out with your little girlfriend while I go do some other stuff.
Literally, I was like, yeah, it's quite weird. It's also, Sam is also like, maybe you should do something about your unfinished business. Again, Sam, her father did just die in a hate crime. Look, please, the bigger picture. So, and also this is the point where Sam guesses correctly that it was Cassie who dumped Dean after he revealed their secret, which makes a lot of sense, because young Dean being like, yes, actually, like, monsters are real and we do hunt ghosts, and Cassie being like, oh, bitch, what the fuck are you saying, and dumping him is the most realistic thing to ever happen on this show.
Yeah. Sorry, Jensen. You're I suppose you're a handsome gentleman, but unfortunately, that red flag is a little bit too glaring, my darling.
Yeah, like, thank God she has a brain. Also, I just want to shout out to her outfit in the first like half of this episode, because it's very early 2000s. It's like a denim skirt to her knees, and then
but you know what though?
Layer Henley.
She's got like a little button down sweater on for a little bit. I'm like, listen, this is what the girlies on TikTok are wearing. Yeah, currently.
I mean, she's giving Lois Lane. Like,
she's trendy.
Yeah, like, she's serving. She's a reporter. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. She's like that is a vibe.
She's wearing like a knee-length denim skirt and then knee-high boots, and I'm like, you are serving.
You're like, you know what? 2000s. All right. Yeah, so basically Dean goes back to the house, and then they start arguing, and he's like, because he's like, yeah, so like, I told her all that stuff, whatever, and she's like, yeah, and I thought you were gonna break up with me, so I just broke up with you because, you know, I thought whatever, and he was like, no, that actually really hurt my feelings, and you're like, whoa, Dean admitting his feelings? Holy shit.
And she's also like, to be fair, she is like, yeah, you did tell me ghosts were real, and I was worried that you were dangerous, so I was like, I'm just gonna cut this off.
Yeah, and he's like, okay, that's kind of valid, but also it really did hurt my feelings. She's like, well, my feelings were hurt too, and you're like, what is happening here? And then we have the first sex scene in Supernatural.
Yes, I would argue it's not a sex scene, it's a lovemaking scene.
You're done. You're out.
I mean, it's no, because it's true.
You're out. And like, here's my judgment on this. Is it equality because every woman on this show is sexualized? Yes. However, there is a trope, obviously, that Black women are often over-sexualized in media and otherwise. So the first sex scene in Supernatural being with the first Black female love interest for Dean, not great, but also equality.
I would also say the other thing too is like what I think almost balances it out. Like, I'm not saying it's great, but I think like the thing that we can say is like, at least this was not like some random woman who was like just throwing herself on him. Like this was, I think it's kind of neat that the first relationship that Dean ever, the first, at this point that the viewer knows, the only relationship that Dean has ever really been in is with a Black woman. I'm like, that's
with a non-white person. Again, overall with this episode, there's some good things, and there's some things where you're like, this would have been much better handled if it had just been written by a Black person. Just overall. So you're like, but you know what? And they also, I will say, the conversation that they do have afterwards is I do like that scene very much. Because it is Dean talking about his feelings, but also there's some interesting little nuggets in there. That is when we find out where she's like, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, like when you told me about that, I thought you were like kind of dangerous, and I was like, I'm good actually. They have a very actually quite normal conversation. And it's quite long, that scene actually.
The lovemaking scene is quite long. Like I was like, this probably could have been like 30 seconds less.
Oh, well, that too. I'm talking about the scene after.
Yeah, it was. I thought that scene was really nice. Like, I think
that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's
the scene after.
Yeah, it's
they're just really, they're just like laying there, like having a conversation. You're like, oh, like okay, all right.
Yeah, it's very sweet. I'm like, oh my god, Dean, you're so normal. Good job.
But also, Dean, can you like make this not be about you for a second? Like, her father did just die.
Yeah, I fear her father did just die. She's really well adjusted though. Good for her.
Like. No, I fear that she is just.
I fear she might be a little bit traumatized. She might have bad coping mechanisms. Love.
I'm like Cassie. You deserve so much better
Girl,
than that fucked up little man.
Get a haircut. Don't call your ex. This is not the like. Do something else.
Like Cassie. I am your no, not Dean. No. She's smarter than that. We find that
Cassie is a girl boss. I love Cassie. Just so we all know,
she is a girl boss. And I mean that is Dean's type. Actually, is just a little girl boss of any gender.
He loves a girl boss of any gender.
Like he does like a little girl boss.
He does. I would say Cassie's a girl boss.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. And I think Benny is a girl boss.
Benny is a girl boss. You're so right.
And Lisa's a girl boss too.
She is.
His type is a girl boss. Because his mom was a girl boss.
And you know what? That's Freudian.
No, it's not Freudian. That's just because she just instilled good values in him.
It's not Freudian that he's like, you remind me of my mom.
No, I don't think it's that they remind him of his mom. I think it's just that he's like,
okay. I see. Like, I feel thou dost protesteth too much.
Then it cuts to the mayor is in a field and he's basically checking the plans because he's like, I'm gonna basically investigate this myself. When we see, and it is daytime, the truck pull up, and this is the white mayor. The truck pulls up and he starts to run, and the truck runs him down, and it's like it hit him, but then the truck disappears.
Yeah, he goes flying. This truck hits him and he flies like down this like 20 feet. It's crazy.
Yeah. And so now it's clear that the truck is like targeting people who are investigating this as well.
Yeah.
So
it's like because like a white man.
A white man, no.
Breaking the cycle.
Yeah. We find out later also why him. But so then this is when they have their like in bed conversation. It cuts they have sex. It cuts to this man being murdered, and then it goes back to
Yeah, I'm like, is that happening at the same time? Because also it's the middle of it's like the morning when he gets hit by the car. I'm like, were they going at it all night? Good for them.
I fear it's not. It's just a continuity.
Okay, well, I'm choosing to believe that they were going at it all night because good for them. I think Dean needs it. And honestly, Cassie, if she's going back to Dean, she needs it too.
Like, oh no, girl, no.
Girl, no.
And so like that's what they talk about. He starts to also he starts to make all these like excuses, and she's like, can you not like just be real with me for a second? And then they're basically interrupted by, I think it's Sam calling, being like, hey, the mayor just got fucking killed.
Yeah, she is crazy. Also, Dean answering his phone, yeah,
and
he answers it, and he's like still lying in bed with Cassie, and he goes like, yep.
Yeah. And so basically what they find out is that he was killed on the property of the Dorian family, who then Cassie explains they were the family who owned the newspaper. And it was a whites only newspaper, and they were a very racist family. And basically once, I don't know if it was like once they didn't own it anymore, or like once it had been integrated. I think they sold it or something. Like once they didn't own it anymore.
They sold it and then it got integrated.
Yeah. It's her father's friend who is the first reporter.
Yeah.
Reporter there.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
it was the first person who died before her dad died.
The first person who died in the opening.
Yes. No. Before the opening.
Oh,
because remember, two black men had been killed by when we first get caught up.
Why didn't they name that guy?
Supernatural.
Can you give the people's names even though they are dead?
Quickly. I'm but a podcaster. I need this information.
But I was like, what? Yeah. So she's like, yeah, they own the newspaper. And the like last living member of that family, his name is Cyrus, and he like disappeared like 40 years ago.
Also, what's very funny at this part is they pull up a newspaper article about Cyrus, and they're like looking at it about like, it's like a newspaper article about his disappearance, and Dean's like, oh, he's been gone since like 1963. And this picture, like, it's clearly like, oh, here's a picture of him. This is clearly like a picture that was taken in 2006.
Yeah.
Like this is a digital picture.
Yeah, it's
taken like, with a digital camera. It's I'm like, that is not, the dude has like spiked hair. I'm like, sir, you look like someone who was alive in 2006.
Dude, what the hell?
It's not that big a deal, but it did just take me out of it for a second. It was very funny.
Literally, what the fuck? Basically what they find, what she also tells them is that Todd, who's the mayor, was the mayor recently deceased,
dearly departed mayor.
Yeah. He had bought the Dorian house, and then he had it bulldozed, and like the day after was when the murders started. And you're just like, okay, like rule number 1, that seems like something you don't do.
To be fair, knowing what the mayor knew that we know that you, the audience, don't know yet, I'm like, I get it. I would probably have done the same thing.
Yeah, but I would have been like, I would raise some weird ghosts doing that. You gotta prep for that.
Not me. I would have done it.
Oh, boy.
I would have done it, and then I would have gotten killed by the racist truck.
Yeah. So basically that night, Cassie's at home, and then the lights start flickering, and the truck appears in front of her house. And she's like closing all the shutters, and she's like, what the fuck do I do? And the truck is like lunging at the house, and she's like, holy shit, what do I do? And she calls Dean and is like panicking, and they show up after the truck leaves. And her mom is there, and she's there, and Sam and Dean are like, okay, the fact that you are not dead right now means that it's trying to scare you, like it was threatening you. The truck was.
No!
It wants them scared, and so they confront her mother, Mrs. Robinson. And they're like, you're hiding something.
Yeah, so the actress who plays Audrey Robinson, who is the mother, her name is Kathleen Noon. This performance is amazing. Like this scene,
Yeah. Well,
this scene is so good.
And it is a fucked up little story that she is about to tell. So
yeah.
I'm glad she gives it the gravitas.
Yeah. Like she is, again, I hate to tell people to actually go watch Supernatural, but like if you are going to watch 2 episodes, the last one and this one, like at least this scene.
This one has I would say this
scene, I mean, not like the whole episode.
With like a heavy content warning, I will say.
Yeah.
So basically, she's like, okay, basically she's like, oh yeah, they're like, do you know anything about this? And she's like, yeah, my husband, Cassie's dad, Martin, he knew who the truck belonged to, and the truck like threatened him in the same way before killing him. It belonged to this guy named Cyrus Dorian, who was of the family that owned the racist newspaper. The racist newspaper family. She says like, but yeah, like he died like 60 years ago or however many years ago. And Dean's like, what do you mean he died? He went missing. And she's like, uh-oh. And then she's like, okay, fine, I will tell the story. And basically, back in, I guess, the 60s? Yeah, in the 60s, she dated Cyrus. And then she stopped dating him and started seeing Martin. And she was seeing him in secret because he was black and an interracial relationship was not looked upon favorably where they were. And so she broke, like, and so when she broke up with Cyrus and he found out that she had started dating Martin, he went fucking crazy. Cyrus went fucking crazy. And he started killing random people. And that like lines up with the stuff that they found that they were like, oh, there were all these random murders there were all these random murders. And, so like a couple like years into their relationship, her and Martin, they're like, okay, we're going to get married. And they set a date to get married. And then they were like, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to elope. And that'll be like easier for us, whatever, because it's really difficult to date as an interracial couple. And they find out that someone had set the church on fire for the date that they were supposed to go get married. And there had been a children's choir inside who all died. Basically, yeah. And you're like, what the fuck? And
no, like this is a lot.
And it keeps getting worse. And you're like, so basically then Cyrus, the racist newspaper man, basically catches Martin,
like hunts him down and finds him,
he hunts him down, and he attacks him. And basically Martin fights back
on their wedding night.
Yeah, it's on their wedding night as well. And basically Martin fights back and like, I guess like hits him one too many times, whatever, and he's dead. Cyrus is dead.
Period. So true.
And you're like, get his ass,
Martin.
But this part. So Martin gets 2 of his friends to help him dispose of the body and the truck, like on their land, I think. And they keep the secret. And Mrs. Robinson is like, they keep the secret forever. And those friends are the other men who died.
Yeah. It's the gentleman who died first before the episode started, and Jimmy, who was there talking to the mayor. So it's the 3 of them.
Yeah. And at this point, Dean says,
I think he may just need to read. He needs to read White Fragility, I'm telling you.
No, Dean, I think you need to read something a little more than that. I think
I fear his brain will explode. He needs a gateway.
Dean Winchester, you need to read some Angela Davis right now.
Literally.
Dean goes, why didn't you go to the police? And Mrs. Robinson, the white woman,
girl boss,
and is like, in the 60s?
And she says, okay, I don't think we'll be doing that, dog. I think the thing too is like that comment though, I don't think that it was necessarily made like to show something about Dean, but more made for the viewer, because a lot
They're
of the
like, damn, what
times,
about the stupid white people watching?
no, literally. But I think like a lot of the time, this is a very common technique in filmmaking and in any sort of storytelling, is where you have a character who, not necessarily out of malice and not necessarily that the character would even misunderstand, but for the sake of the audience, someone says
Yeah,
like a question that would probably honestly be obvious to the character, but so the audience can be like, oh, I just needed to hear it said out loud.
So you get to you have that fun little moment, and then she also says, she's like, well, actually, the police did start to investigate the deaths, and Todd, who was the mayor, he was a police deputy back then, and he figured it out, and he didn't say anything because he also knew what Cyrus did. Because he was investigating all the killings, he figured out also what Cyrus did. And he said, that's none of my business. And he shut the fuck up.
You know what? I don't want to say, of course, a cab. However, this one cop, I like that. Also, the idea that he was like, I covered up for this. Now I'm going to leave the police force and join local politics. Like he said, I cannot do that anymore. He left the system.
I mean, he didn't leave it. He just went to a different part of the system.
Well, yeah, but he's not a cop. So he is a corrupt cop, but in the right way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is very fun. I love it. I was like, so true. He said, I'm staying in my lane and I'm helping you guys out. Goodbye.
He was like,
and now he's dead because he got hit by a racist truck.
Yeah. So that's why now you understand why the racist truck tried to kill him. Because he helped them. And so basically they have that harrowing fucking story, and then it cuts to Sam and Dean out there outside, like in front of the car, and they're like having a conversation about themselves, and you're like, can you guys maybe not, like, it's not about you.
Literally, I'm like, guys, ain't about you.
It's not about you.
But to be fair, then they're also like, okay, well, what are we gonna do?
They're like, all right. And so they're like, terrible news. This does mean that we have to burn Cyrus's body, and that it is at the bottom of a swamp, and that will mean that we do have to dredge the swamp to get him out. And obviously, Todd renovating and knocking down that house awoke him. So we will now have to dredge the swamp at night. Cassie comes out and she's like, all right, let's do this thing, whatever. And Dean's like, you are not coming with us. Like, absolutely not. That's very dangerous. Like, don't do that. And she's like, you cannot tell me what to do. Absolutely not. And I think Sam kind of looks at her and is like, girl boss.
Sam loves a girl boss.
Sam loves a girl boss. And
runs in the family. That's the family business, loving girl bosses.
Yeah, it does love a girl boss. And so then they go, and it cuts to them like pulling it out with like, I don't know, some sort of,
there's like a tow truck. Like they clearly they rented a truck to pull the thing out.
Where'd they get this thing like at this time of night?
I mean, to be fair, there's places if you need a tow truck, you can get a tow truck. But like my question is like, it's really cool that the truck was just like right at the edge of the swamp.
Yeah, I'm like, how'd they find it? They find the bog mummy of this racist man, and his truck, and they pull it out, and they take out the corpse, and they're like, all right, we're gonna salt and burn it. Let's keep it pushing. And then immediately the black truck shows up, and they're like, what the fuck? Like, we're burning the body. I don't understand. And so Dina's like, okay, clearly the body has like decomposed and like become a part of the truck. The spirit is now bound to the truck. And this is a moment I remember from my first watch of Supernatural when Dean is like, you gotta burn the truck. And Sam's like, how the fuck do I burn a truck?
He's like, how do I burn a truck that's like, been underwater? Like, what do I do?
He's like, how do I burn a truck? And I will never forget that, because I also been like, how do I burn a truck? I mean, technically cars are like kind of flammable, but also it's like been underwater for a while. So it's very funny. And Dean's like, I'm just going to let it chase me. I'm going to go drag racing and I'm going to let it chase me, and you burn the truck. So it's burn the original truck while the ghost truck chases me. Also, where's Cassie? Because she came with them, but then she's not there.
Where is Cassie?
Where is she? But then like they talk to her on the phone, so I don't understand. Oh, maybe she's still paying for the truck.
She's filling out the paperwork.
She's filling out the paperwork for the rental of the tow.
Yeah.
And they're like, here's our fake credit card that we pay for everything with. Have fun with this. Then they have this very prolonged chase scene, which is cool. They got stunts going on. Basically, Sam's like, I cannot burn this truck. I can't.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay. He calls Cassie and he's like, I need to ask you some very specific questions. And you're like, what are you talking about? And then he pulls out a map, which you're like, oh, that's what he did at the beginning of the episode. He's like, I finally get to use my map skills. and he's like, okay, Dean, Cassie gave me some instructions and you need to follow them to the T. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I am being chased by a truck. And it's actually kind of funny. And then, and he's like, okay, in 0.7 of a mile, you need to turn left. Like, he's giving him, like, exact directions. And Dina's like, I am being chased by a truck. And it's actually kind of comical at this point. And, so basically he directs him to this very specific spot on the road. And the truck kind of like stops chasing him and is just looking at him, and he's like, what the fuck? And then the truck comes like just full steam ahead at him, and he's like, what do I do now, Sam? What the fuck? And he's just like, it'll work. And he's like, what'll work? And then like the truck like comes right at him, and then like just goes like whoof, and like disappears like right before it's supposed to hit him. And you see that part of the car is under like this arch, and the rest of it is like the arch is like kind of like a broken doorway or whatever, and you see that these are the ruins of that church that was burned down a while ago. And Sam explains, and he's like, so I don't know how to really separate the spirit from the truck, but I do know that getting something near hallowed ground, which is what a church would be, would kind of do the trick. So I thought maybe tricking the truck to get on hallowed ground might help. And Dean's like, you thought? You didn't know? You thought? And he was like, well, and Dean's like, I could have fucking died. What
Dean
hell?
is like, Dean has the funniest number. He's like, what? Did you even consider that it wouldn't work? And Sam is like, no, I actually really didn't.
Sam's like, no, I'm a boy boss, actually.
Oh shit, I actually didn't think. Sorry. Anyway, goodbye.
So it's clear like he knew the plan. Like he called Cassie and he was like, I need to find the church. And you're like, okay, that's a pretty good plan.
Good for Sam.
Yeah, and so basically he's like, there's no church there, but the ground is still sacred. Basically, then the end of the episode is like kind of what typically happens in a Supernatural episode, where like Dean says goodbye to the girl, which happens so much. And basically they're saying goodbye to each other, and Dean's like, maybe it doesn't have to be goodbye this time, whatever. And she's like, let's be honest here. Let's be real. And he's like, okay, like maybe we can see each other, whatever. See each other again, whatever. And then they get on the road, and Sam's like, have you ever like considered like giving it all up and like settling down or whatever? And Dean's like, hand me my stupid little sunglasses and let me go to sleep. And that is the end of the episode. And it does make me just think of like, hey, remember when he did settle down with somebody named Cass and raised a child with them, and they did have a home and a child?
Hey, you know what is funny? He's done that twice.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, this episode, upon second viewing, is not as bad as I thought it was. I think, like I said, I think it
not as bad as you thought it was is pretty much all of Supernatural.
I think,
all right.
Like I said, if it was going to talk about racism, I'm happy it was this way, and they didn't try to get into it a different way, because I feel like it could have gone way worse than this.
I will say, I do like that the message is, nah, racists deserve to fucking die.
Yeah, and it's also don't be a snitch.
Don't be a snitch. Don't be a snitch. Cops are useless. Racists deserve to fucking die in a bog.
that was a very fun episode to end it on.
No.
I promise next week is going to be a little bit more fun. But until then, well, next 2 weeks. I promise that in 2 weeks, the episode is going to be a bit more fun. But until then, thank you for listening. Follow us on social media at Mystery Spotcast. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And make sure that you rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, Overcast, and anywhere else where you can rate podcasts. If you want to hear more from us, check out RuPaul's Pod Race, a queer Star Wars podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And we will see you 2 Tuesdays from now for more slaying people, queer baiting things, the supernatural business.